The internet world was, I guess, so happy that you and I, Joe, were not on for the last 5 days that it was trying to keep us off for another day, thanks to all this technical stuff that we've been going through. But I think keep your fingers crossed as I took two internet hits while I was trying to reset this all up. But welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show with Joe Rayo and Joe Chaffee. First time in 5 day stretch is about as long as we've ever taken, I think.
I think so. You were not available on Sunday. I was not available on Monday. You were coming home on Tuesday. So here we are.
Yeah, here we are, and it's all good. So I know everybody again. Nice to see Bill Uber back, the chairman back, both recovering from their various medical issues. Bill's walking 2 miles a day now. The chairman is cough is finally subsiding, and his blood pressure numbers, which were in blood sugar and all the rest of it that weren't where they were supposed to be, have come way down. So it's all good. Everybody's well. And we can now look forward to whatever we're going to see in the second half of this month, Joe, because um, the pattern looks volatile. A lot of hints around of maybe the tropics revving up again. And now we're starting to see colder air masses coming down from the north. But before we get that, we have one, at least for our area, which general coverage is eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England and everybody in between. We have tomorrow, which looks pretty good.
It looks like a gorgeous day. It looks like we're going to have ourselves, as I mentioned on the first show, which has now been pretty well deleted from cyberspace. I
Nice.
said tomorrow's going to be an outdoorable day, even nicer, much nicer, in fact, than what we had on Saturday of this past weekend, the Ballyhooed Saturday, Joe, which I think a lot of people were anticipating would be a day in the 80s, but never really got
Never
much.
got there. I noticed that. Yeah, a lot of the high level moisture from Hurricane Delta came up. I was down in Georgia, and Saturday night it poured. I mean, it really poured. I think we must have gotten about 3 or 4 inches of rain in about 7 or 8 hours time. It it sounded like somebody had buckets and pouring water down with buckets off the roof of the house. It rained very hard. Everything was soggy the next day. I had great weather when I was up in the Georgia mountains earlier in the week. Beautiful country. If you've never been in North Georgia, it is gorgeous. I don't know. Most people aren't aware that the northern part of Georgia has got a lot of hills, and the northern, you go north of Atlanta, those hills turn into mountains, and you're up at 2, 3,000 feet or more. But it's beautiful. It's just absolutely breathtaking views in a lot of spots. So if you haven't if you haven't done it, do it. I'm
I
just
have not been in, I've not been to northern Georgia. I have been to western sections of South Carolina, like Greenville and
hmm
Spartanburg,
Greenville, Spartanburg. I drove through there on the way home.
and that's a very lovely area too. So, I mean, if you don't like the heat and the humidity, I mean, go to the elevated areas in the southeastern states, like northern Georgia or western South Carolina or western North Carolina, and you'll escape that. But of course, by going to those higher elevations, you do play the game of are we going to get any snow at times during the winter season?
Right.
Because some places,
And they do get snow. I mean, I
yeah,
know in North Georgia, I remember from the end of I was think it was the end of February or the very beginning of March, they had a 4 to 8 inch snowstorm up in the north of Atlanta, but going up in the elevated areas where I was, there was every bit of half a foot of snow in a lot of spots
yeah,
back
yeah.
at that time, and the temperatures were in the 20s. I've been there in warmer times of the year, and now in some of the cooler times, it's a good five. It's a good 5 degrees cooler uh, on average, and I would say 5 to 7 degrees cooler on average, which really takes the just takes the edge off on those hot days. And the nights this time of year are nice and cool. Got down to the 40s every night, which was great.
The dry adiabatic lapse rate, if I recall correctly, from Synoptic Meteorology 101 is 3.5 degrees per 1,000 feet. So if you go up a couple of thousand feet, you can shave off 7 degrees
hmm
off the sea level. temperatures. So
They're
that's
always talking about the dry adiabatic lapse rate at the coffee shop in Blue Ridge. I mean,
oh,
it's
absolutely.
right over breakfast. And yes, I
That's,
did go to the Waffle House.
ha,
I put up
Waffle House
the
is it's a landmark down there. It's
Yes, and
yeah.
the waffles were darn good, I have to say, and the breakfast didn't cost hardly anything. There were four adults, two kids. I think the bill came to $16. It
Wow,
was and then we ate. It was a good breakfast.
that's pretty amazing.
It was, yes, indeed. I ate a lot while I was down there. I made Southern biscuits from scratch. Of course, I stopped at Cracker Barrel a couple of times. By the way, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but there's a.
We have a Cracker Barrel. I was at a Cracker Barrel yesterday, up on Route 9 in Dutchess County.
You see, I have a Cracker Barrel curse that somebody put on me.
Uh
Okay,
huh.
so what happens is, if I like Cracker Barrel, so we'll stop. So we're driving. So you start to see on the exit signs that there's a Cracker Barrel at this exit, but you're not hungry yet. But you're thinking, okay, I'm going to stop at a Cracker Barrel. I'll get to the next one or the one after that. Well, so you go by, so you decide not to go to the first one, and of course you can see it off the side of the road. And then you go past the second one, and you can see it off the side of the road. So you finally decide to get off the exit, right? I get off the exit because there's a Cracker Barrel, the sign, all right? And the sign
Right.
says Cracker Barrel, and usually they're right pretty much close to the exits, a lot of the restaurants, but I happen to pick the one where I get off the exit, and the sign says Cracker Barrel, 7/10 of a mile, and an arrow pointing like this. Okay, I decide, okay, here we go. So I turn, they make the right. Joe, I must have driven maybe about 500 feet. The road split in three, okay, into three separate roads. And there's no sign to tell you which one to take to get to the Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel.
So I didn't get to go to the Cracker Barrel.
Oh dear
So
me!
then,
There was not even a small sign that says Cracker Barrel, take this road or
no,
whatever.
nothing.
The
So
only thing
then I
missing then.
decide, after I laid out a long list of cuss words, I went back on the highway and I said, all right, I'll go to the next one. So I get off the exit where I see the one for the next one. Now you get to the top of the exit ramp to the intersection, and there are arrows pointing to all the restaurants that are listed on the sign except for one,
The
Cracker
Cracker Barrel.
Barrel. There's no Cracker Barrel sign. So, of course, I now replay all the list of cuss words that I went through and decided that, okay, let me just get gas. I might as well fill up my gas tank. So I fill up the gas tank, and then I guess God shined a light upon me because as I pulled out of the gas station to go back on the highway, out of the corner of my eye, I could see the CRA of the Cracker Barrel sign sticking out from behind a tree on the other side of the crossing on the other side of the highway. So I did finally get to Cracker Barrel, but I have a long history of trying to eat there at the Cracker Barrels, and something happens that keeps me from getting there. So anyway, long story short, it was a nice trip.
I'm glad to hear that.
All right. So
And
let's do some weather because I know everybody's chanting about the various runs of the GFS. Actually, it's been doing it for about 7 or 8 days now, where it's been developing something in the Caribbean in the long range, and now we're kind of inside the 10-day time frame. But we've had a couple of runs that have brought to reality my 2020 prediction of a hurricane moving up the East Coast and becoming an extratropical cyclone and producing a big snowstorm in the Northeast. We saw it on the overnight run last night, and we actually have it on the late afternoon run, which we're going to take a look at in just a bit. But I just want to go over again with I know we did it earlier on the show that fell apart because of the technical difficulties, but just to point out that the rainfall over the last 2 weeks has been fairly substantial. 2 to 3 inches. The yellow is all 2 inches. You start to get to those browner colors, you get into the 3 and 4 inch pockets. But a good chunk of the Northeast has been doing rather well from the last two events or so.
You've got mail.
So a lot of dry air, a lot of the dryness, I think, has been dented. the one place that has the severe drought has gotten the least amount of rain, but even here it's been a half an inch to 2 inches of rain for southeastern New England and parts of eastern Long Island. So there is a plus, and I'm thinking, Joe, that we could wind up the Weather Prediction Center folks for the next 7 days, and I think the bulk of this is probably indicating for Friday into Friday night and maybe early Saturday morning a tongue of rainfall from northeastern North Carolina all the way up to Maine, and they have us in the inch and a half plus range from northern Delaware through all of New Jersey, the lower and middle and upper Hudson Valley, and pretty much all of New England, and even some pockets of 2 to 3 inch rains up in northern New England. So they got a very WPC's got a very bullish view of rainfall from this cold front coming and the wave developing on it for Friday.
And this is not going to be due necessarily to any type of convective activity. This looks like it could be just a flat out straight rain, and rain that could vary from light to moderate to occasionally spurts of heavy. But when I say not non-convective, it doesn't look like, Joe, we're going to be in line for, let's say, thunder or that kind of stuff, or kind of a showery type of pattern. I think what I'm envisioning out of this is that it starts raining early Friday. The rain intensifies Friday afternoon. We get into a steady and possibly heavy surge Friday night, and then we'll hopefully see it all begin winding down early in the day on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. If cold front stalls, wave develops on it. You got some good inflow, good overrunning, nice short wave trough that lifts up and around. I think we could do okay with this. So that'll make three significant rainfalls in the last 3 weeks, and that should put a little bit more of a dent in the drought. And the other thing I want to take a look at is, and this is probably I think this might, but we did use this during the Denver snow back at the beginning of September, which sounds very strange to say, but yes, indeed. But this is WPC's, their probabilities of 2 inches of snow showing up in parts of Montana, western Montana, and you're seeing also some lower probabilities showing up in northern North Dakota, northern Minnesota from the next weather system, and also seeing a very, very small couple of tiny pockets in the small area in the Adirondack showing a 1 to 5% chance of 2 inches, of less than 2 inches there, and a slightly higher probability in northern New Hampshire, northwestern Maine, and northeastern Vermont. So I think you might get some precip. Maybe at the end you might see some snow mixing in when that low goes by and the cold air starts to come in up in that area. So the first cheap thrill of the season for parts of for places up north near the Canadian border.
And yeah, and we could certainly again use all of that wet weather to counteract this, because it was actually, it seems weird. June was dry, July and August were very wet. Then all of a sudden we went bone dry again for most of September. We went through a string of like 17 days at Central Park with no precipitation whatsoever, or just a trace, and began to wonder whether or not we were ever going to see any kind of rain. And now we're back to a potentially wet weather pattern coming up.
Yep, and you can see the action, Joe, on the U.S. satellite loop. There's a the system that's going to trigger this all off is a fairly well-defined shortwave that is moving through the northern plains right now, and it's got some weather going on in the northern lakes, but we're fine here. Of course, skies are still clear from central and southern New England, right down the coast into the Gulf states. The whole southern half of the United States is almost cloud free. Most of the action is coming up in the north, and when you look at from the standpoint of the Canadian satellite view, you get this straight line flow coming in from the Pacific into the northwest, so that's carrying these short waves along. But you still have, by the way, this rather impressive looking upper low that's in northwestern Hudson Bay that's starting to do the big rotation. And that, as it rotates around, that's going to pick this all up. This is going to go up to the northeast, and you're going to have a short wave that's going to come down into the east and just sharpen up It's just going to sharpen as it lifts up, and that's going to cause a wave to develop on that cold front that moves through here Thursday night into Friday morning, slows down, stalls. You get the wave, and then you get the rain. And then, of course, as the low intensifies, you're going to bring in some rather chilly air for the weekend.
I could see the 540 line actually, the line that we use during the winter season to differentiate between rain and snow. It doesn't always work out that way. Some
No.
cases we see it a little bit differently, but to see 540 coming on down into our area indicates that this shot of cold air, albeit brief, will be a chilly shot nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. Might not be cold enough to produce any frost or freezes, and I think there's going to be some wind issues for a while, and that'll probably hold the temperatures up. And the first shot does move out relatively quickly. Radar tonight, some rain moving across the Great Lakes back into parts of Minnesota, and you're also starting to see some scattered uh, rain in parts of Montana. And this is the weather system that is swinging, that's moving through that WPC's got the probability of snow there. Also, some rain in parts of Nebraska, but there's nothing going on across the southern half and in most of the west. Still bone dry. That may change in the longer term, by the way. And just taking a look, the southeast in Florida, quiet, nice, quiet and clear, uh, right up into northern New England. No precip going on the radar. So everybody's kind of waiting for this. I don't know how far delayed you are in seeing the video, Joe, but I just pulled up the GFS for next Sunday, and we keep seeing this. Well, there's a couple of things going on that I'm going to go to the tropical view because I think this works better. Uh, the European today, interestingly enough, doesn't really show very much coming out from the Caribbean. It actually focuses its attention on this low that develops. Hang on here. This low that forms in the next couple of days. That's southeast of Bermuda, and that is going to be moving underneath a high, and it winds up moving southwestwards. You see it there. Just let me run that back again, and you can see it starts to form here tomorrow and Friday, and then it starts to move southwest and westwards, or gets into the Bahamas. The GFS doesn't do very much with it, but it does show this sort of inverted trough that approaches the Carolinas, and then lifts up northward up the coast. For this, we're talking about later next week. But at this point, we continue to see the GFS producing a hurricane or certainly a tropical storm and possibly a hurricane in the Northwest Caribbean. Joe, the pressures down there remain very low. I think it makes sense that something's going to try to come out of there.
Well, we've said this all through the summer, and now, of course, we're not in summer anymore. We're into early fall. That the model of choice, at least for tropical cyclones, seems to be this particular year the GFS. I don't know what it is with the European. The European has not had a very good summer in forecasting tropical cyclones, or even when the cyclone has formed, be it a tropical storm or hurricane, it has not done very well. The GFS has been hands down the best. So who's to say the GFS has the hot hand, and
Right.
that may make it all the more reason for us to pay attention, even though we're talking about something that really is not going to begin to get its act together until another week or so down in the Caribbean. But it certainly looks like something interesting for later next week into the weekend.
Now, the European instead, what the European does is it takes that system southeast of Bermuda and moves it like the GFS, but it does more with that, and that seems to be the main driver here. Which by the time we get to day 10 is sitting somewhere east of the Florida coast, and of course, it's also driving some kind of cold, low in the western lakes with a cold front. So that would, I guess, open up some kind of alleyway for that to move northward. I don't know. It seems to me that there's a lot here to work out. I can envision the GFS scenario where you could wind up with some kind of weak tropical-ish like system if that moves westward, that is completely separate from the what it's trying to do in the Northwest Caribbean. And being that this is an active been such an active season, I really kind of have to lend credence to the idea that there could be another tropical storm or possibly a hurricane that develops. But the GFS takes that first one and just kind of runs it up the coast as some sort of low that runs up the coast ahead of a cold front, and then it sort of waits until later on in the forecast period, and then you start to bring the next thing, the more important system, once again. Joe brings it right up the coast, and of course, if we take a look at the precip moisture with the rain and the snow on it, this is for next Tuesday, where it has a 956 low near Nantucket. All right, and it's got snow in western New York, northwest PA, northern New York, ice and snow in northern Vermont and New Hampshire. I mean, who knows if good God? But this is my 2020. This is my 2020 prediction.
Joe, we're coming up on the magic date, or the date that it lives in infamy, is October 29th.
And this would be this was around October 26th, 27th.
Right.
Close
but I mean,
enough.
When I'm saying we're coming up in that time of the year, at the end of October, October 29th, 2011, we had the up here in the Hudson Valley, we had that big early season heavy wet snowstorm, and exactly a year later on that date, we had Sandy in 2012.
Right.
So with some trepidation, when we, at least in the recent years, whenever we get close to the 29th of October, I begin to pay attention, because you never know. And it looks like for 2020, maybe not necessarily October 29th, but 27th, yeah. And we'll see. The intermediate runs seem to be bringing this much closer to us, as opposed to the primary runs.
The primary run, but the primary run last night at 0Z brought it up also, very close to the coast. Did the same thing.
And the 12Z didn't really have.
The 12Z didn't. It took it away. The 6Z and 12Z took it away, but then the 18Z brought it back. But I think when we see stuff like this, and you and I both, we've gone through this every winter, and folks, those of you who are here on a regular basis understand that obviously we're going to see a lot of things changing in the upper air. One of the things that just bringing up the upper air for a Thursday night, what we have is a pattern that if we were in the depths of winter, it would be quite interesting for sure. But we do have a negative North Atlantic oscillation. In other words, pressures are above normal in the North Atlantic and up around parts of across the Arctic region. So everything is displaced pretty far to the south. You've got that magical trough down near 160 west, which puts a trough somewhere in the eastern part of the United States. Although when you look at this, the trough axis is a little further west than snow lovers would like, for in general. Not that we would get anything out of what's going on now, but my point is that one of the things that's happened over the last couple of days that I've noticed is that, Joe, this upper trough that was supposed to be here in the east, I mean, it's every bit as strong as what's been modeled, but it looks like it's it's further west than what was originally modeled. So the colder air, instead of coming in, and it comes in shots rather than just kind of coming in and staying in for a while. So these short waves sort of rotate around. So what we're seeing on these model runs that show some kind of bullish outcome is eventually the trough drops into the plains. Now, if you look here, you can see where the tropical system is. Here's your tropical system. Here's your new trough in the plains, and you're starting to develop late next week, if this is correct, a south-southwest flow along the eastern seaboard. And as that trough strengthens, it just picks up whatever's down there and just shoots it right up the coast. You got a perfect 500 here. You got a perfect upper air setup for a system that's 12 days away. So this is going to change. It's not going to look like this. So I wouldn't be jumping up and down as a snow lover at this point, for sure. And Joe, yeah, you said that around the end of October has put down 2 historic events in the last 10 years, and we don't want to add a third to that.
very notorious two events. And let's not forget also, November 3rd is Election Day, and it wouldn't be. I mean, what would really throw a kink in the election process if we had some kind of a major storm, if not here in the east, maybe somewhere in the west, that precludes people from getting to the polling places. That's also, I think, weather is going to be a very important factor and is going to be looked at very carefully with a lot of scrutiny as we get closer to the end of the month of October and into the very beginning of November.
Yeah.
Don't forget that in 2012, we had Sandy on the 29th, and we had a snowstorm the day after Election Day in that same year.
Yes, we
So
did.
it's
About 9 days later.
it's amazing, but I think after a relatively quiet span, I think we can start looking forward to or looking toward a more active period of weather as we get toward the latter days of this month.
Well, here's a close-up view of that upper air, and let's just go back to what's happening right now, of course. And we have, yesterday's system is that sort of little finger, that finger you see pointing in New England that lifts out. Now here comes the one for Friday, and that trough brings down a shot of cool, chilly air for the weekend, but it quickly lifts out. Then you got another one that kind of rotates around, and after that, you start to see some subtle changes here during the middle part of next week. A bit of an upper high off the Atlantic starts to build right in here off the East Coast, back into the southeastern part of the United States. So that kind of supports what might be going on down in the Caribbean with lower than normal pressures there. You have troughing that starts to drop more in the west, and a little bit of ridging there in the east. And here is, by the way, this is that first system that the GFS and the European pick up on, and that the GFS keeps weak and moves quickly northeastward up the coast. But you got to, Joe, this the Canada part of this equation is very important overall, regardless of how whatever happens, whatever might happen or might not happen. But the fact that the Canadian machinery remains very busy is something you have to pay attention to, because it's going to drop. It's going to have a tendency to want to drop systems into the eastern half of the U.S. in the medium and longer term, as long as we continue to have, this sort of upper low that's decided to form and stay parked up in eastern Canada, in the eastern half of Canada.
And didn't you say, what, maybe about a month ago or maybe a few weeks ago, that you were concerned about the way the upper air was setting up? And at that time, we were entering a relatively quiet period for the tropics. And you were alluding to that, like, well, thank goodness we don't have anything to be concerned about now with the tropics, because the way the upper air configuration
Right.
was, it could very well bring something up. But now we're looking right in the eye at yet another tropical system, and the upper air patterns trying to maneuver into a position where it might pose a threat to the Atlantic seaboard later on this
We
month.
we have seen since the latter part of July and through much of August, kind of took a bit of a break in September, but then it's come back. We've seen this tendency for troughs to drop into the eastern part of the United States, and now we have a little bit of blocking that's going on, a little bit of negative NAO, which the snow lovers would love to see in the winter months, but never seems, for some reason, it never seems to happen anymore in the winter months. But we've got it, we have it now, and that creates a situation that, yeah, you could have all these shortwave, you have all these deep troughs. If you don't have the tropical system there won't be that much to worry about. So a lot of this hinges on variables that we're really not going to know if they're even real for another week or so. So in the meantime, we can just speculate our hearts out, and it really won't matter too much. Here's Thursday night and Friday, Joe. The front stalls right on top of us. You get this wave that develops, produces that rain, maybe changes over to a little bit of snow in northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine at the very end. A little bit of blue shading in there, and runs up to the northeast. Meanwhile, you got this fast-moving low moving through Montana, North Dakota, and Minnesota with a little bit of snow there. and running through next week. I think the weekend should be okay. Are you with me with the idea that the weekend overall, except for maybe some early leftover, rain on Saturday morning, in places say east of New York City, we should see a decent weekend.
I would say that on a scale of 0 to 100, I'd give this upcoming weekend a 75 to 80, and I would give the part that is not so great to be again Saturday morning, as you just alluded to. Maybe a leftover shower or two after about 8 o'clock, although most areas by 8 a.m. on Saturday should be pretty well done, and then it'll just be a matter of playing the game of let's wait until the skies gradually clear out. Sunday by far looks to be the better of the two weekend days as we see it right now.
All right, and just looking at what we're seeing for next week, another weak front comes through on Monday, just kind of falls apart on top of us, and then we just have to, then we wait to see is that system that's southeast of Bermuda that the GFS takes westward toward the coast, brings some rain up for this would be the weekend of the 20. This would be next Friday into Saturday. Another front coming in from the west, and then you start to deal with this colder air that's spreading out from the plains to New England. And again, on this run, pretty bullish there with the low up the coast. Uh, Again, folks, we're not, this is wonderful fiction, really. It's just, and then this is last night's, by the way, Joe. I brought up last night's, which had a 962 low at roughly 39 and a half and 6 and 70. Okay, where it actually changed it to snow in northern New Jersey, your house, northern Connecticut, western Mass. The GFS had the dark blue snow. I have to take a look. What kind of snow amounts did it produce? This is too funny. So obviously, you could tell from my tone, by the way, that I'm not taking this seriously right now. Oh Jesus, good Lord!
What are the snow amounts, Joe?
Oh, they're hilarious.
What do I have? 11?
No. I don't know if that's Rockland County. It's got a 6 there, a 9 at Bridgeport. It prints a 10 in Litchfield County in Connecticut. You're like in the 4 to 6, okay? And
Oh, I better make.
it's even got some streaks of blue over Long Island, and it actually shows accumulating snow all the way down to South Jersey. I mean, this is too funny. This is you basically have the model put the model last night with a history book type snow event.
Well, I better tell my wife not to try to go kayaking next Thursday.
Well, no, not next. She's going tomorrow.
I know, but maybe she wants to go again on Thursday of next week.
Oh well,
If she, if, you
we'll see.
know,
So, folks, obviously, this is an interesting time of year though because you can have really weird things happening in the weather world because you've got the signs of winter are building in the northern regions. You still have what's left of the summer from the standpoint of the tropical systems, the tropical storms and hurricanes, especially in a year like this where we're going to probably stay active right into November. So we still have more names to get through.
now what's the next name?
Epsilon.
Epsilon. Okay. Epsilon sounds like a real. Here comes Epsilon.
Yes. It's something that should be at the 16th pole, headed for the finish line.
And here comes Epsilon.
All right, so you know what we have? We haven't done a Briller Jeopardy in quite a while, so I do have Sundays, which we were supposed to get to, but we didn't have a show on Sunday. So let me roll back here. Oh nope, that's you. Hang on, I'm just gotta get. There we go. Messenger. Okay, so. All right, let me see if this. No, that was the one for last night that we didn't get to do because I didn't get back. And well, you weren't available on Monday. Let's see. Hang on, I'm almost there. Okay, so here we go. So these were the ones that he had for Sunday, which we didn't get to do. So it has to do with presidential inauguration weather. You ready?
Okay.
Since 1937, only 5 presidents' inaugurations had temperatures below freezing. Who were those 5 presidents?
Well, I know the first one that Reagan had in 1980 was, except in fact, am I wrong in saying either it was the 80 or the 84 inauguration with Reagan? It was so cold. Actually, it was 81, 85. It was so cold they had to hold it inside because they couldn't hold. It was just too cold to hold outside.
Okay. Well, and Kennedy was
Kennedy, of course, had the
the Kennedy
snowstorm the day before.
snowstorm,
Yeah.
right? Which was actually the second of 3 10-inch plus snowstorms in this area that winter. Um, so those 2 we know. I'm trying to think of. I'm going to say 2001, probably not. 2005, possibly 2005, January of 2005 for the second Bush, right? Uh, Clinton was 97. That's not likely. 93. Yeah, it's possible. But we know Reagan and Kennedy, so I don't have the answers to this. Oh, but they're on. Oh wait, I do have the answers. I'll have to. I just got to find them. Okay, so um, only 4 presidents had in 4 presidents' inauguration since 1937 had snow falling or on the ground. Who were those? So we know Kennedy was one.
Right. I'm not sure if there was snow on the ground. I think it was very definitely it was cold for one of the Reagan inaugurations. Um, and of course, the reason why we're starting in 1937 is that before 37, inaugurations were on the 4th of March, and then for whatever reason they changed it to January 20th. I
Yes,
think they changed. I think they changed it to January 20th because, from a climatological sense, the January tended to be, albeit colder, but also drier, as opposed to March, where they tended to have a lot of wet conditions or wet weather or snowy weather or whatever. I guess that's why they made the change.
correct. I'm trying to find the answers. I can't seem to find them. He sent them to me on another platform, and I'm not seeing them. So we'll just have to wait till tomorrow, I guess, to find out what the answers are to these things.
Okay,
Does that
I'm
work
not
for
going.
you?
I'm not going anywhere. We're back.
We're back and everything seems to be working now. So I don't know whatever was going on, whatever evil force was here at the very beginning of this show that was trying to prevent us from getting on the air. Well, guess what? It didn't work. We
Yeah,
still managed to
yeah.
to, to do a show. I just want to give just a heads up to my those of you who are Patreon members. Keep a lookout for a post in the next couple of days. I'm trying to work out something that's going to be for a members only thing. So just look for a post when uh, sometime in the next week. I'll have it all figured out. Okay. So just bear that in mind. It's something that I'm going to want to do on a regular basis with members only, and I'll let you know about that. And those of you who are listening to this show via a podcast, welcome aboard. You can listen to this show as a podcast, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're now on Stitcher, Joe, which is another podcast home. So we're on a whole bunch of podcast sites now. And by the way, I didn't tell you this, but this show routinely now has been finishing in the top 40 of Apple Podcasts in the Earth Science category.
Oh my goodness. We should be well, not the first show today that we did.
No, no, well that hasn't. I haven't uploaded it as a podcast yet, but the one of the Hurricane Laura ones that we did, we were number 17.
Wow.
So
Well, I'll
that's
bet if we get anything remotely close to what we're seeming or alluding to for late next week, we might have a lot more than that by late next week.
Scott Briller has sent me the answers, and also thanks Scott for hitting super chat tonight. Joe and I really appreciate it greatly. Um, so inauguration weather in Washington D.C. Most inaugurations day have been colder than average. Only 5 since 1937 have had below freezing temperatures. Um, Reagan in 85, okay.
Right.
Kennedy in 61, where it snowed. Obama in 2009. Carter in 1977. That should have been a no-brainer. January of 77. And FDR in 1941, where
Yeah, the
temperatures.
Carter, if I recall correctly, with Carter actually uh, gave the Secret Service headaches because he actually wanted to walk along Pennsylvania Avenue, if I recall correctly, and the Secret Service was like saying, "Don't, why do you do this? Why, you know?" But he did in the cold weather. He and Roslyn, I think, actually walked on 1600 just to down Pennsylvania Avenue during the inauguration. So
Now, during uh, Roosevelt's inauguration in 1945, G.W. Bush, George W. Bush in 2001, Eisenhower in 57 had snow on those days.
well, okay.
So inauguration day, maybe they should. I wonder. Yeah, maybe they should go back to March when it was a bit warmer.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's because that they determined that March tended to be a stormier month as opposed to January. Also, I don't know if you're aware of this, Joe, but before he took office for the first term, I think it was in just before the inauguration in March, there was an assassination attempt on FDR's life, and he managed to escape. But the mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak, was hit by a bullet and spent many weeks, just they couldn't do anything for him, unfortunately, and the mayor of Chicago passed away. But the future president of the United States missed being assassinated before inauguration day. He had already been elected by this much. It's something interesting. Maybe a lot of you have not had a chance to look that up in Wikipedia or whatever, but that was in 1933, and a kind of interesting historical note.
Well, and there was one president. I think it might have been. Um, I think it might have been William Henry Harrison. Um,
Who was in office for 31 days only because he gave a long-winded speech
right in
in
a
cold and snow, cold and rain, I think.
and got pneumonia.
Right.
And he is also had the record for the largest number of grandchildren when he took office. He had 25 grandchildren.
Wow.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, I remember reading about the presidents. I don't know about you, but when I was going to elementary school, grammar school, at lunchtime on the milk containers, they always had these little tidbits about the presidents on one side of the container. And I remember reading about William Henry Harrison and all kinds of interesting tidbits on the presidents.
Yeah, they just something came out about Tyler the other day about the fact that I think his because he had his he had his he was in his 70s when he had his sons, and that his sons lived to be close to 100, and they had kids late, and like the grandchildren are now still they're in their 90s now, but just
Wow.
the grandchildren of John Tyler, who was we're talking about somebody who was president back in excuse me, that was around in the early 1800s.
Right.
In terms of he was born he was in office from March 4th, 1827 to February 29th. Oh no, that's Virginia senator, president of the Senate, member of the House, vice president. So he was president from 1841 to 1845. I mean, we're going back 170 years here.
Right.
So it's just remarkable that it's only 2 generations.
Not much I can add to that.
No, I know. Neither could I. I don't know how we got onto this subject. All right, so let's wrap it up. Robert Russo, thanks for hitting super chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, guys and guys and gals. When you hit super chat, it does us good. We get to eat for another day.
That's right.
So thank you very much. All
My
right,
wife
so
doesn't, if my wife doesn't get home in time tomorrow night yet from the kayaking, I'll be heading out either to the Clown or the Colonel for dinner.
yeah, Christinapedia verified what I just said because I saw an article about this the other day. That Tyler's grandchildren are still alive. I think they're like 94. I think one of them just died, and there was another grandson that was like 95, which is
Right.
just crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll see you. We will see you folks tomorrow. No one's going anywhere, so no trips for a while. That's one thing I like. The long drives are nice, but uh, the one driving home was tough. That's a 16-hour shoot. I'm still not 100% today over it. But I'm gonna go. I made myself some nice chicken soup today, but it came out spectacular. My daughter gave me she showed me how she made hers, and it was so good. So I copied it, and it was terrific. And I'm gonna go upstairs now and have some popcorn. I finished my wine, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
We'll be here. Have a good one.
So podcast up in about an hour, folks.